The sound of my daughter's voice drifts down the hallway, clear and cold, telling her husband that I take up too much space, that I should be moved into assisted living. Still, I stand frozen at the door, my heart pounding as I clutch the family photo we once treasured. As the words sink in, the weight of betrayal presses on me. That smell of old coffee, once a symbol of comfort, now burns my nostrils. I've given them everything, but now I'm reclaiming what's mine, and my daughter won't even see it coming. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Diana had always loved the morning walks, the cool Spokane air, the quiet streets lined with homes that seemed to have a little too much order for her taste. Everything about it gave her the space to think. Sometimes it was her only time to breathe without feeling like someone was waiting for her to take up less space. But today, the walk didn't offer its usual relief. When she opened the door, Diana was greeted with silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that settles over a room just before something is moved, rearranged. She shuffled her shoes off and placed her bag by the door, her eyes catching on the guest room closet door. It was ajar, and her things, her knitting basket, her old radio, her worn-out throw blanket, were now stacked inside. It was like an afterthought, like something was being hidden away, but not well enough. She stood there, still in her coat, heart hammering in her chest. She didn't need to ask what had happened. Lindsay's voice drifted down the hallway, soft but unmistakable. We're just trying to make things flow better in the entryway. Diana's stomach tightened. She forced her feet to move, the floor creaking beneath her as if echoing the resentment that had been quietly building for months. She went into the kitchen, where Lindsay was already arranging plates on the counter, the clink of porcelain punctuating the uncomfortable air. "I can see that," Diana said, her voice flat. "I'm just curious. Does that mean there's no place left for me in the entryway?" Lindsay didn't look up. "We're just making some changes, Mom. It's nothing personal." Diana bit her lip. She could already hear the whispers behind her back. The ones Lindsay thought she couldn't hear. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but sometimes the words found their way to her anyway. "I'm just always here." Lindsay's voice was strained, almost embarrassed. "She takes up too much space." The soft rustling of Greg's sigh followed. Diana pressed a hand to her chest, trying to steady her breathing. Greg was probably nodding, agreeing with whatever Lindsay said. He always did. "Maybe it's time we consider assisted living," he added, his voice so flat it could have been a suggestion about the weather. Diana's pulse quickened, but she stayed rooted to the spot. Assisted living? The words hung in the air like a weight. They hadn't asked her, hadn't even discussed it with her, just assumed she'd go, just like that, as if she was some piece of furniture they no longer had a place for. She closed her eyes briefly, letting the sting of it wash over her. Then, she heard the faintest shuffle of footsteps behind her. Noah. He didn't say anything, just sat down at the breakfast nook with her, his presence a quiet comfort. They sat in silence, the only sound between them the occasional scrape of fork against plate. He never made her feel invisible, never acted like she was in the way. The silence stretched on, and Diana couldn't shake the image of her things, packed away in the guest closet like they were an inconvenience. Was that how they saw her? Was that what she had become? A person to be shoved aside when they no longer fit in. The loneliness crept in, cold and heavy. She didn't know how long they had been sitting there before the phone rang, jolting her from her thoughts. She excused herself, her fingers brushing against the cool glass of her empty water glass. She already knew who it was before she saw Carla's name on the screen. "You sound like you're disappearing," Carla said, her voice blunt as ever. Diana could almost see her, leaning back in that easy chair of hers, the kind that had seen enough of life to know when to speak and when to just listen. Carla always understood. "I think I am," Diana replied softly. "It's like they're just making more space for themselves and less for me." There was a pause, then Carla's voice softened, just a little. "You know what you need to do." Diana swallowed hard. She'd been thinking about it all morning. What was the point of staying somewhere you weren't wanted, somewhere your presence was just taking up space? She had worked too hard in her life to be invisible, to let herself become someone else's problem. Her hand tightened around the phone. "I do." The line went quiet, the only sound between them the hum of the refrigerator in the background. Then Carla's voice broke through again, sharp and knowing. "Good. It's time you took back what's yours." Diana closed her eyes. She wasn't disappearing. She was simply learning to reclaim her space. She hung up, staring at the empty plate in front of her. The house felt colder now, emptier somehow. When she looked up, she saw Noah still sitting there, not asking, not probing, just offering her the kind of peace she hadn't realized she'd been missing. She pushed her chair back with a soft scrape, standing up. She didn't know what was next. But one thing was certain, whatever it was, she wouldn't let anyone shrink her down anymore. Her steps were slow, deliberate, as she moved toward her bag. There, tucked inside, was the bank folder she had kept hidden for just this kind of moment. Her savings, untouched, unclaimed. Diana's fingers hovered over it for a moment, feeling the weight of everything she had worked for, everything that would now be protected from hands that had tried to take too much. No, she wouldn't be shrinking. And tomorrow, things were going to change. Diana stepped into Mira Chen's office, her pulse quickening as the door clicked shut behind her. The room was cool, modern, the kind of space where every detail seemed calculated, deliberate. Mira was sitting behind a sleek desk, a few papers already laid out in front of her. Her gaze was calm, unwavering, and Diana felt a sense of relief. Here was someone who wouldn't look at her as though she was a burden. "Ms. Blake," Mira greeted, standing to shake her hand. Her grip was firm, her voice clear. "Please, have a seat." Diana sat down slowly, trying to steady her breath. The weight of what she was about to do felt more real now, but it was also a relief. No more sitting back and letting others decide her fate. This was her moment. Mira flipped through a few pages, her eyes scanning the financial details Diana had sent ahead. "You have a pension, savings, and no debt," she said, her tone professional but not indifferent. "That's a solid foundation." Diana nodded, keeping her hands tightly folded in her lap. "I want to make sure it doesn't fall into ungrateful hands," she said, her voice low but resolute. Mira met her gaze, no judgment in her eyes, just a quiet understanding. "I think I know what you mean. We'll set up an irrevocable trust. This way, you'll have protections in place that can't be easily contested." Diana's stomach fluttered with something between hope and fear. She'd imagined this moment, but now that it was here, the finality of it took her breath away. "I don't want anyone to have access to my money who hasn't earned it." Mira nodded, her pen already scribbling notes on a form. "We'll make sure the assets go to the right person, and we can include a no-contest clause to ensure that if anyone challenges the trust, they forfeit their inheritance." Diana's mind immediately went to Noah. He was the only one who had ever seen her, really seen her. He didn't try to shrink her, didn't act as if she was just in the way. "Noah," Diana said, her voice more sure than it had been in months. "I want Noah to be the sole heir." Mira paused for a moment, her eyes flicking up to meet Diana's. She gave a small nod, as though she'd already known that's who Diana would choose. "I'll make the necessary provisions." Diana couldn't help but smile slightly. It felt good to be making the decision. After everything, being pushed aside, treated as if she were a burden, it felt like she was finally taking control. "Nothing wrong with rewarding the people who keep you warm," Carla's voice echoed in her head. Diana had never been one to ask for much, but Carla had always insisted that she deserved better, deserved more. And now, Diana was doing it for herself. Mira set down her pen, folding her hands neatly in front of her. "We'll make sure the trust is airtight. No one will be able to take anything from you." Diana felt a weight lift from her chest. For the first time in what felt like years, she was taking back control of her life, of her future. As Mira continued with the paperwork, Diana's mind wandered for a moment to her daughter, Lindsay. She wondered what she'd say when she found out. Maybe she'd be angry, maybe she wouldn't care. Diana had stopped worrying about that long ago. What mattered now was that this trust would ensure her legacy was protected, that Noah would carry it forward. When the paperwork was complete, Mira handed her the final documents. "Everything is in place, Diana. This is your security, your peace of mind." Diana looked down at the papers, a quiet satisfaction flooding through her. It wasn't just about the money, it was about showing herself and everyone else that she was still here, still capable, still worth something. "Thank you," Diana said, her voice firm but quiet. Mira smiled slightly. "It's my pleasure." Diana left the office with the trust documents in hand, the weight of them a comfort rather than a burden. But as she stepped outside, she caught sight of something in the window of a nearby cafe, a brochure for Sunset Ridge Assisted Living. The glossy paper gleamed under the sun, and for a moment it felt as if the universe was reminding her that her family's plans hadn't changed. They still saw her as someone to be downsized. Diana gripped the folder tighter, the brochure now a sharp reminder of just how much she had to fight for. She wasn't going to let them shrink her, not this time. Diana held the brochure in her hands, the sleek cover reflecting the afternoon sunlight. Sunset Ridge. Assisted living, the words were embossed in gold, a promise of comfort and care, but it felt like a sharp slap. The glossy images of bright rooms and smiling residents seemed so out of place, so falsely reassuring, in the stark silence of her kitchen. Her pulse quickened as she turned it over, feeling its weight in her fingers. She had known this moment would come, had even feared it. "They're not kicking me out," they'd said. But this was no longer about what they said. This was about what they had planned all along. She didn't have to wait long. Lindsay's footsteps echoed down the hall, and before Diana could even speak, her daughter was there, looking at her with a face she couldn't quite read. Diana held the brochure up between them. "What's this?" Lindsay blinked, startled at the confrontation, but then quickly recovered, stepping toward the counter to busy herself with a dish. "It's just information, Mom," she said, voice tight, trying to sound casual. "We're not kicking you out." Diana didn't lower the brochure. "Then why is it here? Why is it in my house?" Lindsay hesitated, but then answered, her voice defensive. "We just want to make sure you have your own space, Mom. It's practical." Diana's hands tightened around the glossy paper, the sting of those words running deeper than they should. "I already have my own space," she said, voice firm. "You're just trying to reclaim it." Lindsay's eyes shifted, avoiding Diana's. "We're just trying to help. You deserve your own place, too." "No," Diana shot back, feeling something within her snap. "No, you want me out of the way." Greg's voice floated from the other room, too calm, too detached. "We just want to make sure things flow better for everyone," he said, as if speaking over Diana's head, as if her voice didn't matter. Diana turned, meeting his gaze. "What you're doing is not flowing better. It's pushing me out. It's pushing me aside." The words hit harder than she intended, but the frustration had built to a point she couldn't hold back. Noah entered the room then, his eyes wide, glancing between his parents and grandmother. He didn't say anything at first, but Diana saw the disappointment in his eyes, the quiet understanding that this wasn't right. After a beat, he spoke, his voice low. "I don't want you to go." Diana froze, her heart swelling at the simple words. Noah had always been the quiet one, but his loyalty was something she held on to. She turned to him, her voice softening but still firm. "I'm not going anywhere they pick for me, Noah. You know that, right?" Noah nodded slowly, his eyes telling her everything she needed to know. He understood. Diana's heart felt full for a moment. This was why she was still here. She wasn't just an inconvenience to him. To Noah, she was a person, and her presence in his life mattered. Diana sat at her kitchen table, the soft glow of her laptop screen casting a faint light on her face. She had just finished setting up the digital vaults, following Mira's advice to ensure her financial independence was as secure as possible. It wasn't just about the money, it was the sense of control that came with it. For the first time in ages, Diana felt untouchable. Every asset was locked behind layers of security, and no one could access it without her say-so. She moved through the steps, updating her banking passwords, setting up two-factor authentication. Her hands were steady, despite the storm that had been building inside her for weeks. This was it, the point of no return. No more letting others dictate her life. She wasn't an afterthought anymore. Her heart skipped when she reached the next part, removing Lindsay and Greg as her power of attorney. She had dreaded this step, but it was the final one. With a deep breath, she clicked through the prompts and finalized the changes. Carla and Mira, they were the ones Diana trusted. They were the ones who had never made her feel small. The decision felt heavy, but right. Diana leaned back in her chair, the weight of it settling in. Her life, her decisions, now protected and secured. Just then, Noah walked into the room, holding a small hard drive in his hand. His expression was calm but serious, and Diana couldn't help but smile a little. He'd been with her every step of the way through this process. The one person who truly understood. "I thought we should move everything off the cloud." "Just in case," Noah said, his voice low, confident. He didn't need to explain further. She didn't need to say it out loud, but they both knew what it meant. Diana nodded. "You're right. She hadn't trusted the cloud. Not completely. This was safer. This was hers." Together, they began transferring all her important files onto the private drive. Noah moved quickly, his fingers steady as he clicked through the necessary prompts. Diana watched him work, a quiet pride filling her chest. This was the future she was securing, not just for herself, but for him too. He was learning, absorbing everything, and she could feel the weight of the responsibility shifting from her shoulders to his, in the best way possible. When the transfer was complete, Noah leaned back in his chair with a faint smile. "It's done. No one can touch it now." Diana let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The relief washed over her, but there was also something else, a quiet satisfaction. She had done it. She had reclaimed her space, her power, her future. "You're the only one who never made me feel like a guest in my own life," Diana said softly, her voice thick with gratitude. Noah looked at her, his eyes steady. "You're not a guest, Grandma. You never were." Diana reached across the table, placing her hand on his. The gesture felt simple but meaningful. She didn't feel like an inconvenience anymore. She didn't feel like she had to shrink herself to fit into the lives of others. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen, truly seen. They sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of the past few days settling into a comfortable stillness. Everything was finally in place. Diana's mind wandered back to Lindsay and Greg. How they had tried to push her out. How they had made decisions about her life without her. But now it was different. She had taken control of her own fate. The sound of her phone vibrating on the counter interrupted the silence. Diana picked it up, her eyes scanning the screen. It was a message from Mira. "The trust is ready to file whenever you're ready." Diana smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her. But before she could respond, another message pinged in. It was from Lindsay. "We need to talk about Sunset Ridge tomorrow. Are you ready?" Diana's smile faltered for a moment. She wasn't sure what she would say to Lindsay. She wasn't ready for their version of what was best for her, but she was ready for her own future. She put the phone down, taking a deep breath. Today, she was finally taking her life back. Diana stood by the window, looking out at the quiet street. The morning sun filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows on the sidewalk. She had just poured herself a cup of coffee when her phone buzzed on the counter, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Mrs. Jensen, the neighbor down the street. Diana had always thought of her as the neighborhood's unofficial watchdog, someone who seemed to know everything that went on around here. "I saw Lindsay and Greg at Sunset Ridge this morning," the text read. "They were there for a tour. Just thought you should know." Diana's fingers tightened around the phone as the words sunk in. A tour. She hadn't been told. Not once had Lindsay or Greg mentioned it to her. No, they had just gone ahead with it, as if the decision had already been made. It stung more than she expected. She stood there for a moment, her heart racing. Every day they'd pushed her aside more and more. The idea that they were now picking out a place for her without so much as a conversation felt like the final cut. The kitchen door swung open behind her, and Noah entered, his eyes immediately scanning her face. She didn't need to say anything. He could tell by the look in her eyes that something was wrong. "They've been to Sunset Ridge," she said softly, her voice tight. "Without telling me. They've already made up their minds." Noah's face fell, and he stepped closer, his voice quiet but filled with resolve. "That's not fair." Diana nodded, the weight of everything she'd been holding in for months pressing down on her. "No, it's not, but it doesn't matter. They've already decided. She paused, her breath catching in her throat. They're staging my exit like it's a real estate deal. Noah's expression hardened, a rare edge to his voice. I won't let them do this to you, Grandma. Diana reached out and placed a hand on his arm, grateful for the steady support he always gave her. I've already taken the first step, she said, her voice more sure now. I've made sure my future is in my hands, not theirs. Later that day, Diana printed a photo of her and Noah, taken years ago at a family picnic. She had framed it and placed it beside her bed. The picture showed the two of them laughing, caught in a simple moment of happiness. It reminded her of everything she was fighting for, the bond she shared with Noah, the love that had never wavered, and the space she deserved in her own life. As she sat back down at the kitchen table, Diana opened the trust documents again. Mira had finalized everything, including the no contest clause that would protect her assets and legacy. She read through the pages one last time, her heart steady now, knowing that everything was in place. Diana wasn't just securing her financial future, she was making sure that no one could strip away her dignity, her choices, her life. This was more than money, it was a statement, a final act of self-respect. She turned her attention to the legacy letter Mira had helped her craft. With a steady hand, Diana updated the final paragraph, her words cutting through the silence of the room. They tried to downsize me. I upgraded my legacy. It felt good to see the words on the page, to know that this was her final word on the matter. This was her legacy, and no one could take that away from her. The doorbell rang, but Diana didn't move. She didn't need to. She knew who it was before she even stood up, Lindsay and Greg. They were probably here to talk about Sunset Ridge, to try to push her again, to ask her to consider their plans, but it didn't matter anymore. Diana stood tall, knowing she was ready for whatever came next. The house was quieter now, the air settling around Diana like an unwelcome coat she couldn't shake off. She had just heard the familiar sound of Lindsay's laughter in the distance, a sound that used to fill the house with warmth, but now felt hollow, a reminder of how far things had drifted. She stood by the window, looking out at the evening sky, watching the colors shift from orange to a soft purple. It was a beautiful sight, one that used to make her feel connected to everything around her, but tonight, the beauty only deepened the distance. The silence in the house was louder than anything. Diana had overheard enough to know what was coming next, another family dinner. Only once again, her name was conspicuously absent from the plans. She heard Lindsay talking to a neighbor outside, the sound of their voices drifting through the open window. She just likes to rest a lot, Lindsay said, her voice falsely casual, as if trying to explain away Diana's absence from the family dynamic. Diana's stomach tightened. The words stung more than she wanted to admit. She just likes to rest a lot. Was that how they saw her now? As someone who just needed to fade into the background? Her thoughts were interrupted by Greg's voice, floating through the hallway from the other room. We don't want to burden her, he said, his tone flat. The words felt like a dismissal, as if they were deciding for her what she could and couldn't handle. She could almost hear the unspoken implication, that she was too old, too much of a responsibility, that she no longer had a place in their life, not as an equal, not as someone who could contribute, not even as someone worthy of being included. Diana exhaled, blinking back the sting of tears. It wasn't new. It wasn't even surprising. It was the same thing, over and over, being shut out, being made to feel small in her own home. She moved toward the sunroom, her steps slow, deliberate. She had prepared a light dinner for herself earlier, but now it felt unnecessary. Still, she sat down alone at the small table in the corner. The room flooded with soft golden light as the sun dipped lower. She took a small bite of her food, but the taste was distant, as though she was no longer fully connected to the act of eating. Her phone buzzed on the table in front of her. Diana picked it up absently, the weight of the text from Carla more comforting than it should have been. They treating you like wallpaper? Carla's words were blunt, cutting through the distance like a familiar knife. Don't let them push you out. You deserve more than that. Diana swallowed hard, her eyes stinging as she stared at the words on the screen. Carla was right, of course. Diana had allowed herself to be pushed into the background, allowed herself to fade into the silence of the house, because she didn't want to make waves, didn't want to be a burden. But now she wasn't so sure. She set the phone down and wiped her eyes. No more, she thought. No more shrinking down. No more letting them erase me. Her thoughts shifted as she reached for her papers, pulling the legal documents Mira had prepared. Diana had asked Mira to set up an end-of-life directive a few weeks ago, something to make sure that even in her final days, her wishes would be respected. The document was ready now, the final details confirmed. Full control, with no interference. Diana picked up the pen, her hand steady as she signed the document. Her signature clear and firm. It was the last piece in the puzzle, the final affirmation that no one, especially Lindsay and Greg, would have the power to make decisions about her life without her consent. This was her life, and for the first time in a long while, Diana felt like she was taking it back. She was not an afterthought. She was not an inconvenience. She stood up from the sunroom table, the weight of the decision solidifying her resolve. The silence in the house, the exclusion, the small ways they tried to push her aside. They didn't matter anymore. This was her legacy, her future, and no one could take it from her. The small envelope lay on the kitchen counter like an afterthought. Diana hadn't noticed it till she reached for her coffee mug, and even then it felt distant, unimportant. She picked it up, wondering if it had come with the mail, maybe a bill or a piece of junk. She was about to toss it when something caught her eye. Noah's name. Her pulse quickened. She tore it open, the thin paper crackling under her fingertips, and unfolded the single sheet inside. The letterhead was from a local hospital, and the words jumped out at her. Minor emergency visit for Noah Hart. Diana blinked, her heart stuttering in her chest. Minor emergency visit? She hadn't known anything about it. Nothing at all. The form went on to explain the treatment Noah had received for a sprained wrist. Something that sounded trivial, but it hit Diana hard. No one called me, not for a moment, not for a simple wrist injury. She wasn't listed as an emergency contact. Her mind reeled. She stared at the form, her fingers trembling as they traced over the lines. The hospital's attempt to explain away her absence from the most basic part of Noah's life. She hadn't even been informed. She set the paper down, feeling the weight of it settle deep into her chest. The finality of it was crushing. Lindsay and Greg had made it clear with their actions. She wasn't part of the system anymore. Not part of their family system, at least. Diana took a deep breath, standing still for a moment as the world outside seemed to blur. The silence in the house felt even more suffocating now. She couldn't be part of a family that made decisions without her, that didn't even see fit to inform her about something as simple as Noah needing medical attention. She felt the familiar ache of rejection, but pushed it aside. No more. No more being the outsider. No more watching from the edges. It was time to take action. She walked to the living room, where her laptop was open, and opened the family folder on her hard drive. She had been holding on to family photos for a long time, pieces of a life she no longer felt connected to. She clicked through them, Lindsay's birthday party, Christmas dinners, and other moments that had once meant something to her. She stopped at a photo of the four of them, Lindsay, Greg, Noah, and herself, taken just a few years ago. She hadn't realized how much of herself she had tied to these images, to this past. Her finger hovered over the delete button, but then her gaze landed on the photo of her and Noah, just the two of them, laughing at a park picnic, their faces bright with shared joy. That one she couldn't delete. He was the only one who had never pushed her aside. She kept the photo of Noah. The rest disappeared in a few clicks. The images of family holidays, of smiling moments that had turned hollow, were gone. Her past with them was now erased, and she felt no sadness in that, only relief. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Carla. "You all right? They treating you like wallpaper?" Diana took a long breath before she typed her response. "They made it official today. I'm out of the picture. I'm not even part of Noah's system anymore." Carla's reply came almost immediately. "You know where you're wanted, Diana. Don't let them push you out." Diana stared at the words, feeling a warmth spread through her. Carla had always known how to offer support without pity, how to speak to her like a person who still had something to give. The weight of everything Diana had been carrying seemed lighter now. She wasn't invisible, not anymore. She pulled on her jacket, grabbed her keys, and sent one last text to Carla. I think it's time I visit the co-op. I'm coming. The next chapter was waiting for her, and this time, she wasn't going to let anyone tell her where she could or couldn't go. Diana sat at the kitchen table, the document in front of her glaring back like a final judgment. She hadn't expected this, hadn't thought it would come to this. But there it was, printed in clean, neat columns, the plan that Lindsay and Greg had drawn up for her. It was a financial breakdown, but not just any breakdown. It was an accounting of how much space she used, how much her presence cost them, and how much it would save them if she were moved out. Her eyes skimmed the paper. Space occupied, bedroom, bathroom, common areas, projected costs for utilities, bills, everything reduced to a series of numbers. The last line stood out the most. Projected care costs for assisted living. She felt her breath catch. Was this how they saw her now? As a cost to be minimized, a burden to be placed in a box, tucked away somewhere for convenience. The weight of it all settled heavily on her chest. She was still holding the paper when Lindsay stepped into the room, her face unreadable. Diana didn't look up, not at first. She just gripped the edges of the paper tighter. It's just for budgeting, Mom, Lindsay said, her voice quick, rehearsed, as if trying to smooth over something that felt far too raw. Please don't overreact. Diana's gaze slowly lifted to meet her daughter's. The calmness in Lindsay's voice contrasted sharply with the storm swirling inside Diana. You've made a plan for me. You've planned my entire future without even asking. Lindsay flinched, the words landing more heavily than she expected. She took a step forward, trying to explain. We love having you here, Mom. We just need balance. We can't keep doing this forever. Diana stood up then, a sharp edge to her voice. You love what I pay for. You hate what I take up. Lindsay's eyes widened, but Diana didn't wait for a response. She didn't need to hear the excuses. She'd heard enough of them already. Instead, she crumpled the paper in her hand and dropped it into the trash. The finality of it felt liberating. She turned toward the living room, walking past Lindsay, heading for the sunroom. It was quieter there, calmer. She needed a moment to think. Later that evening, Carla came over to help. They sat together in the living room, surrounded by boxes, ready to pack. Diana didn't have much to take, just a few things that really mattered. She pulled out the picture frame with a photo of her and Noah from years ago. They were both smiling, so carefree. She carefully placed it into a box. Only take what matters, Carla said quietly, packing the last few of Diana's personal belongings. Diana paused, looking down at the photo. She realized that, in a way, this photo was the only thing that had never judged her. It was a memory of the good times, the ones that hadn't been overshadowed by everything that had happened since. Her phone buzzed. She picked it up to see a message from Mira. The trust has been updated. Emotional abuse documentation is included. Everything is airtight. The relief was immediate. She wasn't just leaving a home. She was taking control of her life, ensuring that the decisions about her future were hers and hers alone. As she packed the last box, Diana smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. The pain was still there, but it wasn't as heavy. She was moving forward, leaving behind the parts of her life that tried to shrink her to nothing. This wasn't just about the space in her home. This was about taking back everything she'd almost lost. The next chapter had already begun. Diana moved quietly through the house, each step deliberate as she gathered her things. The space that had once been home now felt foreign, almost oppressive. She paused at the door, her hand resting on the handle. Behind her, the empty room seemed to echo. The silence, a loud reminder of what had been taken from her, and what she was finally reclaiming. She'd packed light. All that truly mattered fit into one suitcase. Her coat, a few personal items, and the photo of Noah, smiling at a family picnic years ago. The rest, the life she had once built with Lindsay and Greg, was gone now, reduced to memories she no longer needed. Diana took one last look around, inhaling deeply. This was the end of an era. She wasn't just leaving a home. She was leaving behind the parts of herself that had been worn down by constant disregard. She stepped out the door, the soft click of it shutting behind her marking the finality of her decision. Carla's co-op was just a short drive away, but it already felt like the start of something new. Lindsay woke up later that morning to the empty room, the bed neatly made, the quilt folded at the foot. A small part of her was unsettled. She had expected Diana to be there when she woke up, but now there was nothing, not even a note. Her phone buzzed, and Noah's name appeared on the screen. She answered without thinking. "Where is Grandma?" he asked, his voice quiet and confused. Lindsay looked at the silent, empty house around her. She didn't know what to say. I don't know." Greg, coming in from the kitchen, shrugged, sipping his coffee. "Maybe she finally got the hint," he said nonchalantly. "Maybe she realized she was in the way." The words stung, but Lindsay didn't say anything. She just hung up, the phone slipping from her fingers as she stared at the empty room. Diana, meanwhile, was settling into the small co-op apartment, signing a 6-month lease for a place that was hers, completely hers. It was cozy, independent, and quiet, exactly what she needed. It wasn't permanent, but it was a beginning. As the days passed, the decision to leave became easier. The new space was a sanctuary, a place of peace she hadn't known in years. It wasn't about the square footage, but the absence of judgment, the freedom to simply exist without being a burden. The trust was in place. Mira had ensured everything was secure, and Diana knew there was no way back. Noah, too, had his future in mind. He had started interning at Mira's law office, learning the ins and outs of elder law, a path inspired by his grandmother's quiet rebellion. "I'm applying to law school," he told Diana one night, "and I'm writing my essay about generational silence, about how it affects families like ours." Diana couldn't be prouder. He was going to make sure no one was silenced again. Mira texted Diana, "The final protections are filed. No one can touch your legacy now. It's locked." Diana sat back, looking out at the morning sun streaming through her new window. The quiet was different now, not suffocating, but liberating. She wasn't just leaving behind a house, she was taking back her life. And when the doorbell rang, Diana opened it without hesitation. She didn't know who was on the other side, but she was ready. Finally, after all these years, she was free. Diana sat at the small kitchen table in the co-op, the soft hum of the apartment filling the space around her. The air was still and quiet, just the way she liked it. Noah had been visiting often lately, helping her with small tasks around the apartment, but today felt different. Today, Diana knew it was time to share the truth with him, the one part of her story she had kept locked away for far too long. Noah sat across from her, the weight of his schoolwork and internship visible on his tired face. His eyes met hers, expectant but not pushy. He had always known there was more to her story, but she had never been ready to tell him everything. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle in her chest. "Noah," she began, her voice steady but soft. "There are things I never told you about what happened with your mom and Greg. Things I never wanted to say because I didn't want to burden you, but you deserve to know the truth." Noah's expression shifted, his eyebrows knitting together in concern. He set his pencil down on the table, giving her his full attention. "I didn't just leave because of the space," Diana continued, her voice trembling slightly with the weight of the words. "It was because of how they treated me. I was excluded. They didn't see me as someone who mattered. I became invisible to them, and when I tried to make my voice heard, they just pushed me further away." She could see Noah's confusion in his eyes. This wasn't just about space or moving out. She had to explain the layers that had been hidden for years, buried beneath polite conversation and forced smiles. Diana leaned forward, her fingers tightening around the edge of the table. "I found out about you getting hurt, Noah, your wrist. I found out from a hospital form, not from anyone telling me. I wasn't even listed as your emergency contact." Her voice cracked, the betrayal still raw after all this time. Noah's eyes widened, his face a mask of shock. He blinked as though trying to process the words she had just spoken. He didn't speak for a long time, his gaze turning inward as if the enormity of it all was sinking in. Diana watched him carefully, her heart heavy with the knowledge that she had kept this from him for so long. Finally he spoke, his voice thick. "I didn't know. I never knew. I'm sorry, Grandma." The tears that had been building in Diana's eyes finally spilled over. It's not your fault, Noah, she whispered. I kept it from you because I didn't want you to feel responsible. I thought I could protect you from all of this, but I shouldn't have had to. Noah reached across the table, his hand gently covering hers. You were always there for me, even when they weren't. His voice faltered. I wish I could have stopped it. I wish I could have done something. Diana squeezed his hand, her heart swelling with gratitude for the young man he had become. You did, in your own way. You were the only one who ever sat with me without needing a reason. You made me feel like I mattered, like I wasn't just taking up space. Noah's eyes glistened, tears welling up that he quickly wiped away. I'm sorry it took me this long to understand, Grandma. I'm sorry I didn't see what they were doing. You don't need to apologize, Diana said softly, her voice catching. You were just a kid. I should have told you sooner, but you're right. You're the reason I'm still here, the reason I could make it through. Noah sat back, running a hand through his hair, his expression a mixture of sadness and understanding. I promise you, I'll do better. I'll never treat you like they did. Diana's heart ached with pride as she looked at him, knowing that he would be the change, that he would carry her lessons with him into the world. I know you will, she whispered. I know you will. There was a long silence between them, one that felt more profound than words could express. Noah had grown, and he was no longer the boy she had to protect. He was becoming the man she had always hoped he would be. Carla's text came through, breaking the silence. I've got the documents ready, they're all locked in. Diana glanced at her phone, then back at Noah. The finality of the trust was here, airtight, unchangeable. The decisions Diana had made for herself were now complete. She had protected herself and Noah. She had reclaimed her life in every way possible. I think you should have these, Diana said, handing Noah a folder of papers. Everything's been finalized. I want you to understand what I've done and why. Noah took the folder, his fingers brushing hers as he carefully flipped through the documents. His eyes met hers again, full of respect and understanding. I'll make sure it's never taken away from you, I promise. Diana nodded, feeling a weight she hadn't even realized she was carrying lift from her chest. She had told him everything, finally let him see what she had kept locked inside. And in doing so, she had given him the one thing she had wanted to all along, a future built on truth. The storm had passed. Now there was only calm. And Diana knew with certainty that it would last. The call came just as Diana was finishing packing her things, the final touches to her new life. The apartment was quiet, filled only with the sound of her breathing and the weight of what was about to unfold. The phone buzzed on the table beside her, and when she saw Lindsay's name, her stomach tightened. Diana answered the call without hesitation. Mom, we need to talk. Lindsay's voice was tight with frustration. We need emergency access to your accounts. You've shut us out of everything. Diana exhaled slowly, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. It wasn't unexpected, not after everything. She had known this would come, the final demand, the last attempt to control her. But the truth was, she didn't owe them anything anymore. I'm afraid I can't help you with that, Mira's calm voice cut through the phone. You have no legal standing. That was your mother's decision. Lindsay's voice rose, panicked now. She's being manipulated. She's not thinking straight. She's cutting us out of everything. Diana closed her eyes for a moment. The words like knives. She had heard it all before. The accusations, the blame. But this time it didn't hurt as much. This time she was finally free. Greg's voice chimed in from the background, distant but firm. Or maybe she just left us behind. The words struck Diana like a hammer, but she held herself steady. She had been left behind, hadn't she? For years she'd been treated like a guest in her own life, her space an afterthought. They hadn't seen her, hadn't heard her. Lindsay's voice came back on, desperate. You don't understand, you're pushing us away. But Diana had already made her decision. She wasn't going to let anyone push her around anymore. The call ended, and Diana sat there, the silence swallowing her. The walls of her co-op felt different now, somehow more solid. This was her life, her space. She wasn't going to let them take that away. Later, as she sat at her desk, Diana opened the legal documents on her computer. She had already updated everything: her will, the trust. It was all locked in now, no going back. But there was one final thing she needed to do. With a steady hand, Diana added one last note to her will. Nothing for Lindsay, not even a mention. She wasn't angry, not anymore. It was just the way it had to be. She had given so much, but it had never been enough. Diana closed her laptop with a quiet click. The weight that had been on her shoulders for so long had finally lifted. She was free, truly free, but she wasn't done yet. Diana opened a new file, a time-locked document. She titled it Legacy. She would leave it behind when she was gone. A simple statement of her truth. She typed the words slowly, carefully. I was never a burden. I was never too much. I was just never allowed enough. With one final keystroke, it was done. Diana had sealed her legacy. It wasn't about money or material things. It was about her story, her voice, and no one could take that away. The doorbell rang, and Diana hesitated for only a moment before standing. She knew who it was, but she wasn't afraid anymore. She had already shut the door on that part of her life. She was ready for whatever came next. Diana sat back in her chair, eyes scanning the final documents that Mira had emailed to her. The trust was now officially in place, every detail locked down, every protection secured. The estate, her pension, her savings. None of it could be touched by Lindsay or Greg. The legal barriers were up. She had taken control, truly and irrevocably. Her phone buzzed on the table. It was Carla. Diana had been expecting this. You did it clean, Carla said, her voice warm with approval when Diana picked up. Everything's sealed. No one can touch it now. Diana smiled softly. I did it quietly, she replied, the weight of her decision lifting from her shoulders like a stone being rolled away. She hadn't made a fuss. No drama. No need for it. All the decisions had been made calmly, with her life finally back in her hands. That's the way it needed to be, Carla added. You've taken your power back, and now you're free. The words hung in the air between them, filling the space with something Diana hadn't felt in years, peace. Noah had been visiting more regularly, helping her settle in and organizing a few things around the apartment. Today, he was sitting at the kitchen table, reviewing notes for his internship at Mira's law office. His quiet concentration was familiar, and Diana admired the man he was becoming. Just the other day, he had spoken about his growing passion for law, particularly elder law. She had never been prouder of him. I'm learning a lot, Noah said as he looked up from his papers. Mira's been teaching me about trust law, the way people protect their assets, kind of like what you've done. Diana chuckled softly, glancing up from her own papers. I suppose I've become the textbook example. Yeah, well, you're teaching me more than Mira ever could about living life on your terms, Noah replied, a smile tugging at his lips. You really did take your power back, Grandma. Diana nodded, grateful for the boy he was becoming. It was a long time coming, she said quietly. After hanging up with Carla, Diana spent the rest of the afternoon at the Co-op's Learning Center. She had signed up to tutor a small group of kids, something that seemed like a far-off idea when she first arrived, but now felt like the most natural thing in the world. It wasn't just about filling time. It was about purpose, about connecting with young minds, something she had missed in all the years of being pushed to the sidelines. She had always wanted to give something back. And now, here she was, sharing her time and experience with children eager to learn, filling the empty spaces that had once felt so vast and hollow. As Diana walked back to her apartment later that evening, she paused in front of the sunroom. The space that had been dubbed too much by her daughter was now hers to fill. The light poured through the windows, and she couldn't help but smile. It had become her sanctuary, her refuge from the world she had left behind. No more apologies, no more shrinking to fit someone else's version of what she should be. The space she had once been told was too much was now exactly what she needed. It was a reflection of her, a place where she could breathe, think, and grow without fear. The quiet comfort of the room was all hers. She took a deep breath, feeling the cool air mix with the warmth of the sunlight. It was the first time in a long while that Diana felt entirely at home. Later that evening, Diana sat in the sunroom, a cup of tea in hand. The final legal steps had been taken, the protections filed. And yet she felt no triumph, just quiet satisfaction. She had done what needed to be done, and now it was time to live. She looked out the window, her heart light, her thoughts still. The storm had passed, and now it was the calm that remained. And it was enough. Diana sat at the kitchen table, the envelope from Lindsay resting in front of her. She didn't even need to open it to know what it was. The neat handwriting, the smooth cardstock, it all felt like a hollow gesture. Lindsay's attempt to bridge the gap that had been widening for years, but Diana knew it would be empty inside. She picked it up and tossed it into the trash without a second thought. It wasn't the first time Lindsay had tried to make her presence felt with these polite, insincere gestures. But Diana wasn't fooled. She had long stopped waiting for her daughter's validation. She wasn't going to keep carrying the weight of those empty gestures. Diana glanced at her phone. A message from Mira popped up. The legacy documents are filed. Your letter to Noah is preserved, and your letter to Carla is included. No mention for Lindsay. It's done. It's done. The finality of those words settled deep in her. She had taken the steps needed to protect her future, and now there was nothing left to do but live. Later, Noah arrived at the co-op. He'd been around a lot recently, checking in, helping her get settled. Diana loved the steady presence of him, the young man he was becoming. As he entered the kitchen, she could tell something was on his mind. He handed her something, a small piece of paper, folded carefully. She opened it slowly, surprised to see a hand-drawn card from Noah. It wasn't perfect or polished, but it was heartfelt. A simple drawing of a house with the words, "You're never in my way." Her breath caught. Noah had always known how to give without expectation, how to make her feel seen. Unlike the empty card from Lindsay, this was genuine. She smiled, tucking the card into her pocket. She would keep it forever. As she sat back down, Diana's mind turned to the book she had been thinking about writing. Occupied Space, a collection of her thoughts, reflections on the years of feeling invisible, and the quiet rebellion that had led her to finally take control of her life. She wasn't looking for fame. She was simply giving voice to those who had been pushed aside, people like her who had been told they didn't matter. Once the first copies were printed, she distributed them to local senior centers. The feedback came almost immediately, with many people telling her how much her words resonated. One note from a woman in her 70s read, "This was my life too. I never knew someone else understood. You gave me my voice back." Those words hit Diana like a wave. Her simple act of sharing her story had become a lifeline for others. She wasn't just telling her own truth. She had created a space where others could reclaim theirs. As she reflected on all of it, the doorbell rang. Diana stood up, but this time, she didn't hesitate. She knew who it was. She was ready. The storm had passed. Now, she was free. Diana had never imagined her story would resonate so deeply with others. What had begun as a personal expression of reclaiming her own life, occupied space, had become the centerpiece of a growing movement. After sharing her story at 2 small public panels, she found that her words were no longer just her own. They were shared by others, echoing in rooms filled with people who had been treated as invisible, just like she had. She hadn't expected such a response. At the first panel, a room full of seniors had listened intently, their faces a mixture of concern and quiet recognition. Diana spoke not just of her own struggles, but of a universal experience, how elders are often made to feel like they no longer belong, as if their worth is tied only to what they can provide. Her story wasn't just about her family. It was about every elder who had ever been discarded, overlooked, or ignored. There was no applause after her talk, no grand accolades, but the silence was powerful, filled with understanding. Diana had spoken a truth so many felt, but never dared voice. The second panel had been smaller, more intimate, but just as impactful. It was there, after her talk, that a woman named Clara approached her, tears in her eyes. "I've never heard anyone speak my truth so clearly," Clara said, her voice raw with emotion. "You gave me my dignity back." Diana didn't know how to respond at first. She wasn't used to such direct validation, but as she looked at Clara, she realized something. It wasn't just her story anymore. It was a voice for anyone who had been made to feel small. Diana wasn't just sharing her experience. She was making room for others to step forward and reclaim their space too. Lindsay, completely unaware of the quiet revolution her mother had started, saw a clip of Diana's panel online. But there was no comment, no call, no sign that Lindsay recognized the impact her mother's words had. Diana didn't care anymore. She wasn't waiting for validation from a daughter who had never fully seen her. At the co-op, Carla took it a step further, organizing a community discussion using occupied space as a foundation. Diana felt a rush of pride as her words found their way into conversations. Not just about aging or isolation, but about dignity and respect for all people, regardless of age. Meanwhile, Noah was finding his own path, inspired by his grandmother's journey. "I'm applying to law school," Noah told her one evening. "I'm writing my essay about generational silence and how we need to stop letting our elders feel invisible." Diana's heart swelled with pride. The boy she had helped raise was now stepping into a world where he too would fight for those who had been pushed to the edges of society. "I'm proud of you," Diana said softly. "You'll make sure no one has to be silenced again." Her own work had sparked a ripple effect. Mira had even texted Diana, "I'm adding your story to my elder law lectures. People need to learn how to protect themselves, their voices, their space." Diana read the message and let out a breath. Her story was now part of a much larger conversation. The trust she had fought for, the space she had claimed, had become the foundation for something bigger than she could have imagined. And just as the day drew to a close, Diana sat in her quiet sunroom, feeling the weight of everything she had built. The space that had once felt too much was now the home of her peace. Through reclaiming her own voice, she had created a space for others to do the same. The storm was behind her, but the calm was only just beginning. 5 years later, Diana passed away peacefully in her sleep. It wasn't the sudden kind of loss that throws everything into chaos. It was quiet, gentle, like the closing of a book that had long been written. Diana's life, the way she had lived it, had been hers, and now, even in death, she remained in control. The trust, which had been locked down and secured, activated just as planned. Mira, ever the meticulous protector, had ensured that every clause was airtight, and when Diana passed, her wishes were followed to the letter. Noah inherited everything, her savings, her assets, the apartment that had once felt temporary but had become her home, her sanctuary. When the news reached Lindsay, it was as cold and final as the rest of the story. A form letter arrived stating that she had no legal access to the estate, no contest allowed. The words were a final punctuation mark on a chapter Lindsay had no control over, one she had never truly understood. The letter that came with it, Diana's parting words, was simple but filled with years of quiet truth. Diana's handwriting, the letters formed with steady confidence, read, "You made me feel unnecessary in my own life, so I made sure my life never needed you." For the first time, Lindsay had no response, no power, no place to intervene. Diana's legacy, sealed by the trust, was far more than material wealth. It was a statement, a declaration that no one could ever dismiss her again, not even in death. She had taken back what was hers, not just assets, but respect, dignity, and control. In the weeks that followed, Noah used part of his inheritance in ways Diana would have been proud of. He donated a portion to expand the co-op where Diana had found solace, ensuring more people could experience the space that had given her so much. The remaining portion went to a local elder legal fund, creating a resource for others who needed protection, just as she had. One quiet afternoon, as Noah stood at the door of the co-op, Carla approached him. She held a small, weathered plaque in her hands. It was simple, engraved with a few words, and when she placed it outside Diana's former room, Noah felt a wave of emotion rise within him. The plaque read, "She never left. She just found better space." It felt like a final, fitting tribute to everything Diana had fought for. She had not been pushed aside. She had carved out a new place for herself, not just in the co-op, but in the hearts of those who had been fortunate enough to see her for who she truly was. She had found her space, and it had grown into something much more significant than anyone had ever anticipated. As Noah stood there, his hand resting lightly on the plaque, he thought of Diana's final words, the way she had shifted from feeling like a burden to reclaiming her life. And in that moment, it hit him. She had never been too much. The world had just made her feel that way. Diana had transformed her story, and in doing so, had changed not only her own life, but the lives of everyone who heard her. In the end, her trust had held through the storm just as she had. Noah closed his eyes for a moment, silently vowing to carry her lessons with him into every corner of his life. And when he thought of the words Diana had left behind, he understood them more deeply than ever before. My daughter told her husband I should be moved into assisted living because I take up too much space. So I moved my savings into a trust for someone who never asked me to leave the room. Diana had taken her space, and she had made sure no one would ever ask her to leave it again.